Hello everyone, my name is Renee. Thank you for joining me for another English lesson. Today we're going to be talking about the word start. Have you ever started an activity by saying something like, let's start? I know in Korean, especially when I was teaching in the elementary schools about a decade ago, the co-teacher would always say, 시작, and when they're talking about starting an activity. And I think a lot of Koreans then started to use this phrase, let's start. Maybe that comes from that Korean expression. But in English, let's start is actually not the most natural way to say, let's begin an activity. More commonly, we would say something like, let's get started or let's get going. So today we're going to look at those expressions as well as some similar expressions related to starting something. So actually the word start is not really used in spoken English that much. Start or let's start. You'll see it in apps and games and things like that. But in spoken conversation, you usually will say something like, let's get started or let's get going. So the first expression we'll look at is let's get started, and that can be used in both casual and formal situations. For example, if you're starting a meeting, you can say, okay, everyone, let's get started. We have a lot to discuss today. Or let's get started by introducing ourselves. So here you're saying started by doing something. And going to the next phrase, we also say let's start by. So let's start by introducing ourselves. So here you have let's start, but it's actually let's start by. Let's start by doing something. So let's start by introducing ourselves. And there's also another phrase, start by. Now this is when you are giving steps to do something, like a recipe. And the first step you'll say start by. So for example, start by putting some oil into the pan. Now another phrase that we use is let's get going. And we use that when there's a sense of urgency, when you're in a hurry. For example, let's get going. I'm pretty busy today. I have a lot of stuff to do. I don't have much time. Okay, one thing to be careful about is let's get going actually has two meanings. So one is, as I mentioned, let's start now because there's a sense of urgency. Let's get going. And the other one is let's leave a place. So let's get going. So let's start to leave somewhere. It's like, oh, it's getting late. Let's get going. Or traffic's gonna be bad soon. It's almost rush hour. Let's get going. That's when you're trying to leave somewhere. And the other one is, as I mentioned, oh, let's get going. I have a lot of stuff to do today, so let's start the meeting. One tip to keep in mind is that in English, it's not that natural to say, let's start to verb. For example, let's start to sing or let's start to dance. It's more natural just to say, let's sing or let's dance. That definitely sounds a lot more natural than saying start to verb. So just keep that in mind. All right, we're going to do a little mini quiz. So the first one is you can blank by introducing yourself to the team. You can blank by introducing yourself to the team. And the answer is you can start by introducing yourself to the team. Number two, let's blank. I have another meeting soon. Let's blank. I have another meeting soon. The answer is let's get going. I have another meeting soon. Number three, blank, boiling some water. Blank, boiling some water. And the answer is start by boiling some water. So that could be a recipe for something. All right, that brings us to the end of the class. So remember, try not to say let's start unless you're saying let's start by doing something. Alternatively, you can say let's get going or let's get started. All right, well, thank you very much for tuning in today. Please be sure to like and subscribe. And if you have any questions or comments, please leave them below. Thank you very much and see you next time. Bye-bye.